Greetings, dears. This is Annette, back again with another moment for chronic wellness. Thanks so much for joining me. So, 15 years ago, we're having these conversations about whether or not someone is disabled or a person with a disability. And at the same time, we are having very frank conversations about what is sort of the hierarchy of disability. And by that, I mean, who are the people who are considered most disabled by what are lovingly referred to as TABs, temporarily able-bodied individuals. And of course, we're called that because most of us over the course of our lifetime will experience disability, whether it is because of a chronic long-term health condition that robs us of ability, or because of a serious injury or accident, or some other incident in our life takes away capacity. We will experience disability, and it is a functional part of the lifespan of the human condition. So, TABs, temporarily able-bodied individuals, TABs. And that most of us TABs tend to see people in wheelchairs as people with disabilities. You know, I mean, that is the graphic that, you know, that's the thing that's on all the signs for where you can park and on the button that you push for the doors to open. And that is the person with the disability. And then down from that might be blind people, and then maybe it's deaf people, and then maybe it's like amputees or people who use crutches, and then it starts to get real muddy, because anything that's invisible or that's mental health or that's chronic illness, we're not so sure if that should count. And even with the folks that would say, hey, I am at the top of the hierarchy of disability, it doesn't preserve you in any sort of way of having your dignity. You know, it doesn't keep people from walking up to you and saying, I'm praying for you, and Jesus wants you to stand up and walk right out of that wheelchair. Or, you know, deaf folks having somebody come up and just touch their hair, you know, forehead and being like, you are healed, now you can hear. And then being like, I couldn't hear what you said. I mean, there are all sorts of ridiculous, outrageous, audacious, bananas stories that happen day in, day out, assaults on our dignity to all of us in the human experience, and those of us who experience disability. And there's plenty to go around, folks. But I will tell you that making the leap from person who worked in disability to person considering claiming disability was one of the furthest journeys I've ever traveled. It is a very far distance. Whether it's because it wasn't an identity that I was born into, or because it wasn't, you know, an accident that just suddenly robbed me of abilities. It was a slow, stolen from me in dribs and drabs way that I first came into chronic illness. I don't know, but claiming disability, applying for disability, was one of the hardest mental things I've ever done. How about you? Have you come to that point in your illness? Have you wondered if you should apply for disability, but aren't sure if you'd qualify, or aren't sure what that process looks like, or don't know if you're really disabled? We'll continue to dig in on that one. But for the time being, suffice to say, it's not easy. Like many things with these illnesses, this is a tricky tricky one to balance. And somehow I didn't feel like my circumstances were as valid as what I thought of as real disabilities. Isn't that an insight to my thoughts, right? That my experiences were somehow less than, somehow not as important, somehow not as they didn't qualify. Suffering is suffering, folks. Pain is pain. How about you? Have you applied for disability? Are you considering it? Did you get it on your first go round? Have you never gotten it? We'll talk more in the coming days until we're together again. I am so grateful you're here. So glad that we are not alone on these journeys. So glad to be sharing some of this burden with you. And until we're together again, take care of yourself. Be well.